Everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be doing our 9-10 support tier list. So as always, if you enjoy the content, be sure to like and subscribe. It's free, it's easy, just takes a couple of clicks, helps out a ton with visibility on the channel. And if you do enjoy the content, be sure to check out the rest of our offerings as well. I just released a patch notes video earlier today. I'm going to release an 80 carry and a jungle tier list over the next couple of days, and I'll probably try to squeeze in a mid-tier list as well, so tons of content for you. Be sure to check all that out, and come check out the stream as well. We stream every night on YouTube, starting around 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We usually go till about 2 a.m. It's a wonderful, very chill, cool community, so drop by sometime, hang out, watch a couple of games, ask some questions, enjoy the atmosphere. We'd love to have you. Okay, so let's go ahead and get in here. And as always, you can find it, access this Google Doc in the description. I'll have timestamps as well if you don't have time to watch the whole video. And with each one of the champions we're going to talk about here, I have a mini Google Doc inside the main Google Doc. You can click on that, and it'll show you recommended items, recommended runes, and then I have a 5-point rating system as well. So 1 meaning the champion is one of the weakest at that role, or at that particular task at the support role, and then 5 being the champion is one of the strongest. So lane pressure is just how likely is the champion able to get priority. Kill threat is how likely can the champion kill other champs during the lane. Safety is how safe is the champion, particularly from ganks. Scaling, how well does the champion perform over time. And then reliability, how likely is it that someone can perform well on this champion over many games. So that can play into how difficult is the champion to play, and also how well does the champion fit into the current meta. Are there a lot of counter picks out there? Okay, so let's go ahead and get in here. So real quick meta update. I am going to talk about Yuumi first up after the meta update. I think the TLDR is I think she's going to be weak on release, so stay tuned for that. I'll talk about that more here in about 5 minutes or so. I think that Lux is super powerful right now. I've been playing her a ton on stream lately. I'm going to talk about Lux. She's number 1 on my list, so we'll spend a lot of time talking about her. I did release a full guide on her as well last week, so be sure to check that out. But we will talk about that more. I think her power is going to continue to climb on this patch. As far as the Soraka goes, we pretty much got trolled by the wording in the Soraka sort of changes that went about last patch. Because it said that if you go and look at Soraka here, it says she's supposed to get increased movement speed for 5 seconds. And then it says it decays. But decay is a very imprecise term, and we don't know exactly what that means, right? So a lot of times that you know, when I hear something decays, I'm thinking that it falls off slowly over time. So if something is decaying over 5 seconds, I'm thinking that it's going to have about half of its value left at 2.5 seconds. So if something tells me it's a 35% move speed increase and it decays over 5 seconds, I'm thinking I'm still going to get at least 15% of that move speed at 2.5 seconds. That is not true at all. This decayed ultra fast last patch. Like, it was basically after half a second, it fell off by like 99%. It just was not even there at all. And so that 5 seconds is extremely misleading. This, the healing happens over 5 seconds, but the speed falls off extremely quickly, and it doesn't tell you how fast it falls off. So decay is a really imprecise term. It's very annoying to try to figure out, you know, as someone who analyzes League of Legends. It's very difficult to figure out exactly what that means. They did change that on this patch, so it says significantly less rapidly, which once again, not a precise term, so we don't really know what it is. It'd be nice if they gave us at least a milestone to say after 2 seconds you will retain such and such movement speed, but we don't know. So Soraka might be a ton better on this patch. She may not be better at all on this patch. A lot of it's going to come down to just how much that decay happens, because if she gets a lot of that movement speed, if she actually keeps, you know, somewhere between 15 to 20% extra movement speed, and if she can hand out 15 to 20% extra movement speed for the first 2 or 3 seconds of that queue, that can actually be quite powerful. But if it's just going to be a novelty, if she's not actually going to retain any movement speed, then she's still not going to be as good. So we'll see. I know also, just a follow-up from last patch, Tom Kinch, you know, people pointed out, you know, he's marginally better than he was. He was like a 46% win rate. Now he's 48. He's still not going to be that great in the bot lane. And a lot of that's just because his kit became very simplified, right? Now he's just an aggressive early game tank. You know, his Q does a lot of damage, but his utility is much, much worse. His ult is worse. His W is worse. So at top end play, he's going to be a lot worse. But at sort of just your platinum and lower play, he's going to be a little bit stronger because the easier parts of his kit are going to be a lot more powerful. So, he's kind of up there with Braum now, which is to say pretty far below 50%. I still would not recommend playing him. I know that there are some other content creators that are really big on Tom Kench. I'm not believing it. So, yeah, he did trend upward some, but that's in like the most generic of cases, and I still don't think he's going to be that great. And in the best case scenarios, I think when you'd actually want to pick him as a counter pick to things like Leona, to things like Thresh, I think he's going to be a lot weaker. So Nautilus is trending higher, though. I've been calling that. Some content creators were on board with that. Some people were not. But he's going up a lot, and I've been recommending him for a very long time, and he's slowly been going up. Now, yes, he has had buffs several times, but he's even seeing some pro play at MSI, so he's very, very good right now. In fact, he's the best statistical engaged champ, and I think he's the best engaged champ overall, too. His kit is just so strong. We'll talk about him later on, but I think he's going to continue trending upward. So, Rakan's on the rise. He was stronger on this patch. Like I said, a lot of people were saying that was the nail in the coffin for Tom with his ult. I was saying not really. He has a lot better laning phase, and there are still a ton of combos you can use without having to use the RW combo. So at least at Platinum Minus, I think that he's a lot better, and the win rate is, bearing that out a little bit. Now he's finally over 50% for the first time in a long time. So it's kind of like that Tom Kench-esque effect, sort of not really, because RW is pretty easy to do. But he does have higher base stats, and he has a stronger laning phase. That's helping him out a ton. Also, I think Xayah might come back into the meta. We'll talk about that more in the 80 carry tier list, but I think that the buff to Essence Reaver and the nerf to Gensu's actually helps her out quite a bit. Just in general on this patch, you can expect more crit ADCs and less on-hit ADCs. So you're probably going to see more Jinx, more Sivir, Twitch, Draven, a little bit less Varus and Kog. You didn't see them that much anyways. Kai'Sa, we'll see. I know Kai'Sa's still very popular. I think she might actually switch over to a crit build. And then Vayne, I think, is going to fall quite a bit. But people will probably still play her because they like playing Vayne. Aftershock is still good. Jury was kind of out last time, but it's still good on squishy champions that want to use it, especially in the early games like Lux, Fiddle, some of these other, I guess those are really the only two mainstream supports that would use it in the early game, but still pretty good. 70 magic resist and 70 armor is great early on. Yes, it's not going to be as good later or like early on in the game. Those flat stats are still good. Later on, it's not going to be as good, but really, you should be able to position fairly well where you're not getting as engaged on as often later on in the game. It's really just in those early levels of the laning phase where you're afraid of getting engaged on by something like a Leona or a Nautilus or something like that. So it still covers you there. In the laning phase, it's still going to be strong. Ghost Poro is very good on supports. I've been trying it out. I think it's amazing if you scale with AP. Getting to the rosy scenario of, the 12 to 15 minute full stack on Ghost Poro doesn't always happen. You have to get pretty lucky with some of the placements of the Poro, but you can very comfortably get it before 20 minutes. And even at 20 minutes, it's still going to be stronger than Gathering Storm. Gathering Storm doesn't get stronger than Ghost Poro until 30 minutes. And you get the extra vision from Poro. And you get better incremental gains, or especially at level 1, you can pretty easily get 4 to 6 extra mana. So I think it's just a better version of Gathering Storm for most games, and Gathering Storm was really popular for a long time on a lot of different champions. So I think it's great, and I think Relentless Hunter is actually pretty insane. Getting that out of combat movement speed early on, getting the 9, and then getting an extra 10 per kill and assist. During the laning phase, you're often going to get 1 kill or assist, maybe 2. And if you get 2, that's 30 out of combat movement speed. That's really, really powerful. So I'm really loving the Relentless Hunter. If you haven't tried it yet, definitely give it a try. If you don't like Ghost Poro, Taste of Blood is another alternative that's still going to be really strong. So I think that something in that tree, in the domination tree, more people should consider that. And then just expect there to be some more tanks in general. They did nerf Conquer on this patch. They have buffed a lot of the tanks over time. A lot of the tanks are performing well in the jungle. I'm not the biggest fan of Amumu, but it's hard to deny he's at about a 55% win rate, even in Platinum. So he definitely is winning some games out there. And then Rammus and Sejuani are all up there as highly played, high win rate champs. Volibear, less than a 2% play rate, but he is winning some games somehow. And then Vi doesn't usually go tank. you know, she's going to be one of those Trinity Warrior type users. You can see it's going to be bruisers and tanks. They're going to be the types of champs that are going to be crawling up here a little bit. So I expect that to continue. Sejuani's up a ton. Remember, just a couple of patches ago, she was like 47%. I predicted she was going to climb quite a lot after some of those changes, and she has trended upwards. Hecarim did trend down a little bit more than I thought he would. I think he's still pretty good in the jungle overall, but you know, that nerf to the Q definitely is adding up, and the nerf to Conquer will drop him down just a little bit, and it'll drop Jax down a little bit as well. But I still expect they'll be pretty strong. Stay tuned for my jungle tier list for more insights into those things. Okay, so let's start off with talking about Yuumi really quickly. I'm going to do a separate video about Yuumi after I get to play her and play against her. And sort of think about her a bit more theoretically. But I just want to kick it off with Yuumi because I know that's what everybody's wondering. Everybody wants to talk about it. I have her as an honorable mention. I don't think she's going to be tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. And this isn't just because I know that there are some content creators out there who just refuse to rate a new champion the first time that it comes out. It's not because of that. Like, I legit think she's not going to be in the top 15. For this first patch. Now, after the first patch, maybe a couple of buffs that she gets, or maybe people learn how to play her a bit better. You know, maybe she goes up a little bit more, but I definitely expect her win rate to, you know, be 50% or lower. And there are a few things that go into this. I mean, she could maybe sneak in at tier 3 above, like, Galio and Braum or something, because she is an enchanter. She's going to be easier to play than these in most metas. So, like, I would put her at tier 3 at the very top. But there are several things about Yuumi that are problematic here. But I will recommend, you know, some runes and some items here in just a second, because I know everyone's going to want to play her anyways. I want to play her. I'll try her out. But there's a few things about her that I just want to go over really quickly. So this isn't going to be a full guide. It's just a really quick mini, like, initial thoughts about her. She has really low base stats. So she's very squishy. And she has really low attack range. This is key, that she only has 500 attack range. That is much lower than most other supports and most other AD carries. Average supports, average range supports, average AD carries are going to have, you know, about 550 attack range. So the fact that it's much lower means that there's a really high probability she's going to get hit trying to go in to land those auto attacks for her bop and block. So that's rough. If she had something like 550 auto attack range, that would help out a lot in the laning phase, but with that low, it's going to be rough. And you might say, well, she's going to be, you know, just sitting on somebody the whole time, so her health doesn't matter. But it does, because you're going to have to get out and land your bop and block, or you're going to run out of mana. And because she has, her mana regen is really low for an enchanter. It's only 750 or 7.5, so that's very low early on. So she's not going to get as much benefit out of fairy charms either. So she has to pop off and then land this bop and block. It's going to give her a shield. Now, the nice thing is, you know, she's going to block most of an auto attack that comes back at her. So when she walks up to try to auto attack, she is going to get this shield. You know, it probably will block most of the damage that's coming on her before she zips right back onto her ally. And then she's going to get a bit more mana. But this is only up every 20, you know, a lot of times in the laning phase, like maybe 17 seconds or less. That's like once per minion wave. You can do this. And the shield is not that big early on. It's okay, you know, at level 5 it's 80, but it has a really low AP ratio on it. Now you can give this to your AD carry as well, which is nice, but that's a huge issue, is that she's going to be taking really bad trades whenever she goes in, because there's nothing else that she wants to cast when she jumps off the bop and block. You're just going to pop off, try to land your auto attack, and jump right on somebody, because the Q is terrible if you're not attached to anybody. It's going to be very easy to dodge. It just goes in a straight line, and it does super anemic damage unless it travels for 1 second, which is quite a long distance. So you have to hit it at a long distance. Now, when you're attached to somebody, you know, you can guide this around and try to hit people with it, but there's a lot of counterplay to this too, especially in minion waves. People can just hide in a minion wave and block a lot of this. It doesn't do any sort of AoE damage. So that's going to be tough. Also, if your AD carry doesn't actually step up in the laning phase, if they just stand like maximum distance away from the creeps, and the enemy AD carry stands maximum distance away from the creeps, it's going to be very unlikely you're going to hit them with Prowling Projectile, because they can just walk out of range of it. So it is pretty good. It is a guided missile. It's a fairly low cooldown for something that's supposed to be intended for light trades early on, but it does add a decent little slow duration to it. once again, it has that word decay on it, so we don't know like how much of that slow is actually going to stick. But it's okay. Like, it's decent poke. It's just really conditional. Like, there's a lot of counterplay to the enemy for it. And it requires cooperation from your AD carry's positioning to make it work. So it's all right, but it's got some problems as well. This is a very anemic ability, the W. Now, this is kind of her marquee thing where she shares some of her AP with your ally, and some of their AD gets shared with you as adaptive force. But it doesn't do anything else. Like, that's it. It has no trading potential in the laning phase. Like, this bonus is super weak in the laning phase. Like, even giving them, 8%. If you max this, you get this to level 5, 8% of their bonus AD. That's not total AD. And how much bonus AD are they going to have early on in the game? I don't know, 50 once they get a couple of items? Once they get a BF sword even, they might have like 50. So you're giving them an extra like 3 or 4 AD, which is okay. But if you choose to get 3 points of this in the laning phase, that means you're literally doing nothing else. Like, you're giving them a very small bonus. Like, you're basically sacrificing your entire lane to give somebody like half a longsword. To give somebody 120 gold worth of AD. It's like less than a lot of runes out there. So it's really, really anemic early. Yes, there will be all caps videos, I'm sure. I've already seen one that's like Vhagar with Yuumi having like over 1,000 AP or whatever. But like, in most situations, it's just going to feel really bad to level this up because it has no additional benefits. When you're attached to them, it doesn't change like how often you can jump around. That's just static based on level. So I feel like this is going to be really weak to try to level up early on. So I think it'll be the second or the third thing that you level. I think you have to level your Q just so you have some kind of presence in the lane, just so you can actually poke people and do some damage in the laning phase, potentially. And the scaling is okay on it. You get up to 260 with a pretty nice slow on it with a 0.6 ratio. It's all right. It's 6-second cooldown. It's okay. So you're probably going to have to get that. And then Zoomies is like ridiculously underpowered if you only have like 1 point in it. This is 18 seconds per charge, not 2 charges, 1 charge. So if you're trying to get both charges, that's 36 seconds before you can do like your full power heal. And, even if they're at 1% health, it's only going to heal them for 50 with 1 point. It's going to be 130 heal if you max this out second, but it's still going to be 28 seconds before you get all of your charges back. So I think that's really goofy. I think it shouldn't even be charges. Why is it charges? It should just be 14 seconds to get a maximum 130 heal. That you just have a normal cooldown. Or whatever, a 260 heal with a normal cooldown. I don't know. It feels like this is very, very anemic. You do get a little boost in movement speed, but once again, it decays. So we don't know what decays means. We'll just have to get a feel for it in the game. But yeah, it just feels like that's really low. And it's an insane amount of mana. To use both charges at max level, it's 200 mana. 200 mana for a 260 heal. If they're really low. If they're not that low, it's only a 130 heal. So, I don't know. That feels really anemic as well. And then Final Chapter looks cool. Like, yeah, it's a huge AoE radius. You can hit a lot of people, but they have to stand in it for like a second and a half. So they have to have no mobility, no flash, no nothing. And if you're attached to somebody and you use this and your AD carry or whoever like doesn't line this up properly, or they just like go the wrong way, then you can miss. Once you start channeling it, it's going to be in one direction. So you can, run around. You can jump off yourself and help channel it in the right place. So there's some interesting stuff you can do with it. But overall, I just don't understand how, she's not going to get bulldozed in the laning phase because she has nothing to trade with. Like, all she's got is her Q. She has no point-click CC before she gets her ult. That takes a while to charge up. And, like, what's going to stop somebody? Like, what's going to stop a Leona for just going on your AD carry and just one-shotting him? What's going to stop, Nami or Sona from just walking up and just spamming all their spells on your AD carry while you're attached to them and they just die or have to leave the lane? Like, I just think she's going to get completely obliterated in the laning phase. How does she trade? I mean, she pops off auto attacks with bop and block with her 500 movement range and her, 55 base damage auto attack with no empowerment, no extra damage. What do? You pop off to bop and block, the enemy, like Sona, is like, okay, and then they just auto attack you, Q you, break your shield, and then you pop back on. You don't do anything for 15 seconds, and then they just come up every 5 seconds and do, like, 150 damage to your AD carry with Scorch, Airy, and auto attack in their Q. So it just feels like no matter what it is, they're just going to be able to hard pressure your AD carry. Like, your AD carry is going to be 1v2 in this lane if you're in here, if you're here. And there are other champions that also buff up the AD carry a lot, notably Lulu, who are also, like, pretty decent in the laning phase. Like, they can have some real trades. The fact that you're very rarely going to be auto attacking and you don't have any abilities that are, like, reliable that can do damage, is a massive liability. It's massive. Like, yeah, you might be giving an extra, like, 8 AD or something by staying attached, but, like, 8 AD is nothing compared to just auto attacks, right? Like, if you just pop off and start, like, or just with a normal champion, you're auto attacking, you do 60 damage per auto attack. Like, if you're, Zyra or Nami or Sona or whatever, like, that's way, way more damage. Like, actually being able to auto attack for 60 damage is way more than giving your AD carry 8 extra AD early. So you're just sacrificing too much. Like, you're giving up way too much presence. So I think these numbers need to be big. Like, I think the shield needs to be a lot bigger. I think that, this needs to be, like, super buffed. Like, just at least the cooldown on it needs to be buffed a lot. So we'll see. I hope I'm wrong. I hope there's some cool stuff out there with her, because she is a really fun champion. Like, it's got some unique things, but I think they're being very, very conservative with her, because it is weird. You are untargetable, so that's a huge buff. So you don't have to worry. Like, you can go full offensive stuff comfortably and not worry about getting blown up. So that is really nice, but they're trying to make sure that it's not too overpowered, that you're paying a very hefty price for that kind of protection. So if you do want to try her, though, I think that you really need to go Airy and Ardent Sensor. That way, when you're jumping between different people, you can spread the Airy buff, or you can spread the Ardent Sensor buff to a bunch of different people. You can also reapply that Airy shield fairly often, especially once you get to higher levels and there's no penalty for jumping on and jumping off. So like at level 11, you can, like, jump on and jump off a lot and just keep reapplying the Airy shield to somebody. So that's kind of helpful. Sorry, there's some kind of... Anyways, never mind. So she's got some potential with that. I think Airy does help out. Mana Flow Ban helps you out with sort of your mana. You are going to have some mana problems with Yuumi, with your Q. Yes, your passive helps you out with that, but later in the game especially, you're going to need that extra mana. And then just get as much, like, AP as you can so you can share that with your AD carry. So, Absolute Focus, Gathering Storm, Ghost Poro are all great scaling AP items. And then Relentless Hunter is really nice on her, and you might think, well, why would I want that? I'm not going to be, like... I'm going to be attached a lot of the time anyways. Yes, but you're still going to have to run out and ward by yourself. You're still going to have to, try to rotate between lanes. You're still going to need to move around sometimes. So Relentless Hunter will help you out with that. And if you go Relentless Hunter, you probably won't need to get tier 2 boots. So you could probably just get brown boots. You might be able to skip boots altogether, but I think getting brown boots is probably okay. But you can go Relentless Hunter, just go for the brown boots, skip the tier 2, and then that'll save you a lot of money on your boots in the long run. And then just Frostfang for the poke, and then I think you have to go Athene's Ardent Sensor, Redemption, Mikhail's. You can charge up some Athene stacks by hitting your Qs and jumping off and doing your bop and block, and then whenever you reattach, you'll heal them up a little bit. So she's not the most, terrorizing Athene's user in the world, but... I think it's still going to be pretty good on her. Ardent Sensor is obviously something that you want to do. And then Redemption's pretty good as well. It's just kind of your standard Enchanter fare. So, once again, I think she's probably going to be a little weak out of the gate here. But overall, you can give her a try if you want. Okay, let's get in here. Wow, I talked about her a little bit longer than I wanted. But I know everyone wants to hear about her. So, there you go. There's my thoughts on her. And then, of course, we will still try to play her. Like I said, if we get the opportunity, we'll give her a shot in ranked. But she's going to be picked and banned a lot. Okay, let's talk about Lux support. I get asked about this all the time. I did do a Lux guide earlier this week, so be sure to check that out. I do have it linked here in the Google Doc, and it's on the main page of my YouTube channel as well. So I'm not going to go like ultra in-depth into that, but I'll talk about it here just really quickly, just a few of the highlights about what makes Lux really good. Now, she has not been this good for a really long time. I think she's only been this good for maybe a couple of months, a few patches or so. She wasn't unplayable in the past, but there have been a lot of shifts in the meta and a lot of nerfs and a lot of buffs that have kind of slowly helped her rise to power over time. And I talk about that in the Lux guide, so be sure to check that out if you want to know, well, why has she risen up, kind of slowly over the last year and then gained a ton of popularity in the last month and a half. A lot of it has to do with meta shifts. So she used to be like a 40 to 45 to 50% win rate support with very low play rate for 7 or 8 years. But then last season, they buffed a couple of things about her. Specifically, they made her Q a lot better if you only put 1 point in it. They buffed the shield on her W quite a bit. And they changed some things around about Lucent Singularity to make it much more mana efficient. And a bunch of the runes have changed around, and a bunch of other champions got nerfed, most notably things like Janna, Lulu. A lot of these other shielding champs got nerfed halfway through last season. And then, just some of the other more meta supports have been nerfed over time. And that has had her rise to prominence. So she was stronger in the preseason with the Dark Harvest meta, where you had a bunch of like high AP poke supports that were really good. That got nerfed out. But then recently she's come back with an Aftershock build, and you can still go Aftershock or you can do Airy. We'll talk about the options here in just a second, but that has helped her rise up in popularity, and she is she's getting stronger and stronger every patch. She's at almost a 53% play rate right now, and she's getting played even in high elo. This is not a low elo troll build, which is sort of what Lux had been for years and years and years. The low elo, rush Tear the Goddess or rush Luden's Echo type of thing. That's not what's happening here. People are getting real support items. They're getting Athenes, they're getting Ardent Censer at sort of the highest end play, right? So you're seeing a lot of, a lot of Athenes builds, Ardent Censer. You're seeing occasionally someone will get something like a Luden's, but by and large, you're going to be seeing a lot of Redemptions, a lot of Ardent Censers, and Athenes Unholy Grail. So what's up with this? Why is Lux stronger? There's a few things about Lux, and these are things that I never really appreciated until I played her a lot over the last week, and I'm still learning even more interactions with her that are useful. So she has a little bit of extra damage for trades. It does scale pretty well over time for a passive. There's no cooldown on it, so anytime you touch somebody with an ability, if you auto-attack, it is going to do extra damage. This does apply to minions as well, so if you hit the backline minions early on, with this, and then you auto-attack them, you can prep it really easily for your AD carry just to finish those off. So she has very nice wave clear early on. So a little bit of extra damage definitely does help out there. Nothing crazy. Okay, Light's Binding. This ability is extremely good for several reasons. Number one, it's a 2-second bind for 1 point. That's very, very strong. So that's the same thing as a Morgana bind early on, but it has a much lower cooldown. Remember, Morgana's bind, I think it's like 15 seconds or something. Let me just pull up Morg here really quickly, just because I think that's the nearest comparison to her, and Morg has been nerfed several times. Last patch, she got nerfed a couple of times, and she was nerfed a few patches before that. A couple of times, but I think there are a lot of similarities here. So Morg's is actually kind of similar. So for 1 point in it, it does root for 2 seconds. It's an 11-second cooldown. Similar mana cost, similar speed, similar range. Okay, so a lot of similarities there with Lux. However, there's one key difference. This can actually hit 2 people. Okay, so its hitbox is not as wide, but it can go through minions. So that means this is always a huge threat, and there are many times in team fights where you hit 2 people with this. So the fact that you can get 2 2-second binds, you can throw it through minions, Makes this very, very useful. So it's like a Morgue Bind, but I would argue for 1 point, it's even better than a Morgue Bind. Now, Morgue Bind does obviously go up in damage and does go up in root duration all the way up to 3 seconds. So if you put a lot of points in Morgue's Bind, it's going to be better than Lux's. But for just 1 point, it's very, very strong. And that's really important because you want to be maxing your other 2 abilities first. And this is something that distinguishes her from Morgana and a lot of other supports as well, is she has a very, very good single point ability, and all the rest of her abilities are great when you max them out. Versus Morgana, you know, like your W is just kind of a waste of time. Like, you know, you'll put 1 point in this early on, but it's pretty worthless throughout the rest of the game. For like mid lane Morgue, it's a little different. You can wave clear and push in with this, but for support Morgue, it's pretty worthless. And then your Soul Shackles has very limited applications as well a lot of times. Like, it's okay, but it's harder to use as support Morgue, you know, until you get to your Hourglass. But if you get Hourglass, you're not getting a lot of other things. But anyways, we're focusing on Lux here. So Q, very nice 1 point wonder. Now, this Prismatic Barrier is crazy. This is some insane shielding. So it only costs 60 mana at all levels. At all ranks, it's only 60 mana. It has a really long range, so 1075. Janna's shield range is 800. Lulu's is 650. Like Soraka's heal range is like 450. So this means she can be very, very far away at a very long, safe distance and still hit people with Prismatic Shield. And this can hit multiple targets. It's definitely going to hit you every single time, and it can shield anyone else that it touches. So in a team fight, you can realistically hit, you know, 2 other people with this, sometimes even more if everyone's stacked up. You can hit a lot of people with this to give out the shield, and it gives up to 330 shield, base shield, on a 10-second cooldown when it's maxed out with a 0.6 ratio. That's just a crazy amount of shield, and it lasts for the full 3 seconds. Now, the first one, if someone's close to you and you hit them with it, then you're going to hit them, and then it's going to go out. It's going to last for, you know, like a second and a half, and then it's going to come back and hit them again. So realistically, it lasts for 3 seconds, but the first one's going to get applied. Then a lot of times you're going to get at least 1 extra second, sometimes 2 extra seconds before the second one gets applied as well. So this really lasts between 4 to 5 seconds for the shield. So that's really handy, especially because it heals you and it heals allies. It can hit multiple targets. Now, it is a skill shot, so you have to actually hit people with it. You got to practice. I mean, one good thing to practice is anytime you're going to throw this out, just throw it at an ally. You know, even if someone's on you trying to kill you, always just throw it at an ally. Or if you need to, if you're going to retreat, you can fling it in the opposite direction. So, you know, if someone's jumping on you in the middle of Riverbush or whatever, someone's jumping on you like right here and you need to run this way, you know, you can turn around, throw your W this way, and then like flash or run this way to go catch it. So basically you throw it and then run to go catch it, which means you're going to get it faster. You're going to get that shield sooner. So it's pretty versatile, very handy. And the fact also that it has a really high base shield number means that you can apply Athene stacks really, really well, which we'll talk about here in a second. So you can easily top people off with this and use all of your Athene's charges. And then Lucent Singularity. Now, this is something that, unless you play with it a lot, it's difficult to appreciate just how strong this is. Okay, so it has really nice range early on, so very good poke. You can poke and throw it without anyone being able to retaliate most of the time. Maybe like a Xerath or, you know, some other super long-range champ. But most supports and most AD carries will not be able to respond to this. So you're free to just chuck Lucent Singularities, especially after your first back. You get Frostfang, a couple of Fairy Charms. You can throw quite a few of these out. It does pretty good poke damage. Does apply Scorch. Does apply Comet. It does slow them when you hit them, so it's almost guaranteed that it's going to apply Comet. If you want to, you can go Cheap Shot. So if you throw the E and you just wait for like, you know, a split second and then reactivate it, then it will trigger Cheap Shot. So that can be a lot of poke if you start thinking about, you know, Scorch plus Comet plus Cheap Shot plus the base damage on this. It's a lot. And if you're close enough to auto attack, then you get that empowered auto attack illumination as well. So that's really handy. It gives good poke. Most people can recognize that, right? That's kind of like stage 1 of why this ability is strong. But the more powerful thing, I think, in the long run is the vision that this gives. It gives vision of an entire area for 5 seconds, and that's something that doesn't get talked about a lot with Lux support, and it's immensely powerful. It basically means it's a really safe way to check bushes. You don't have to go up and ward. It's 1,000 range. That's like twice as far as you can place a normal ward. So you can like throw your E in this bush from like right here. And it illuminates this whole area. So if there's a control ward in this bush, you will still see everything because it does not count as a ward. It's just a ball of light that sits there for 5 seconds. So you can actually throw your E here and then walk up and clear this control ward. And it actually shows everything around this. I think it might even show around walls. I know it does show into bushes, even if it's not in the bush. So like if you throw an E right here and there's a control ward in this bush, it will see the control ward in the bush. You can still target it and attack it. So I don't remember exactly if it sees past walls or not, but it definitely does see into bushes, even if it's not in the bush. So you might say, okay, well, that's cool, but does that really matter a lot? Hell yes, it matters a lot. There's so many different ways you can use this for clearing out control wards, like I mentioned before. It's so dangerous to walk up here and place a normal ward and then try to clear this out because the ward is going to get shut out of vision. Since someone, you know, the jungler could come running down here and gank you. Versus if you have that E in this bush, you'll see them while you're clearing out this ward. It's just like Zyra's plants that I talk about all the time. And why one of the main reasons I think Zyra is really strong that people don't talk about enough is those plants can give you free vision. Lux is very similar, but you can do it from an even longer range, and it doesn't tax you. It doesn't cost many extra resources at all, because while this thing is charging, a lot of people don't realize this as well. It stays up for 5 seconds. The cooldown is ticking even while it's up. So, you know, this goes down to an 8-second cooldown. You know, you have 30% CDR in the mid game. It goes down to about a 6-second cooldown. So you can throw this E out, let it sit for the entire 5 seconds, and then it explodes, and then it's up again in like 2 seconds or less. So you're really not using a lot of resources versus something like Zyra, you're having to use one of your seeds, which is not going to recharge for another 15 seconds or so. So that's really nice too, that you still have a lot of power. Like this is not going to be on cooldown for very long. You can still hold your Q to bind people if they come at you. You still get to hold your shield. So the fact that all of your abilities are useful means that, you know, if you miss a bind, it's not great if you miss the bind, but you still have your shield, you still have your Lucent Singularity, like you still have a lot of tools in your kit. You know, you miss your E when you're trying to poke at people, no problem, you still have your Q. So she has a lot of different ways, a lot of different threats out there that she can use. So you can check vision in the bushes. You can also use this to zone people off of things. This is another thing people don't talk about. So, and it saves you wards. So for instance, and this was a real thing that happened in a game of mine, I just got done warding around Baron. I put my control ward on the Baron. You know, I put a normal ward over here, and I think we had a ward up here. So we had really good control of this area, but the team wanted to come down and grab this Windrake. After we got priority middle, it's like, okay, no problem. So I was able to put a ward here. Well, now I'm out of wards because I want to keep these 2 wards to help protect red side. I used one here. So while we were doing Baron there, I just threw my Lucent Singularity right here. It gave us vision of this area, and it makes it very unlikely that anyone's going to walk through it, because if they try to walk through it, I can hit them with a Q and then ult them, right? And so that little zone there not only gives vision, but it makes it very dissuading for people to try to walk through that. Because it's such a huge slow. A 45% slow is massive. Remember that 45% slow is not reduced by things like Mercury treads. That just reduces the duration on things. And it's a static thing that sits on the ground, so it's going to apply to them no matter what. So that makes that slow particularly really, really strong, because it's a zone slow and not an ability that like hits somebody for a set duration type of slow. And that's the final thing that I've really, you know, just begun to kind of appreciate a lot more, is that slow is really, really strong if you don't activate your E immediately. Just leave it on somebody. Sometimes that can be so strong. So like if you're getting ganked, you know, somebody's trying to roll up here, just, you can throw an E right here, you know, and it'll create this entire slow zone, and it's going to be really hard to get around. So you don't have to reactivate it as soon as they step in there. You just let it sit there. It'll slow for a lot. Or if you bind somebody, you know, and you don't think you're going to be able to all in and kill them, but you just want to slow them, you can chuck that E on them. So you bind them right here, just throw the E on them for the slow, and that can be really powerful. Or maybe like, you know, a bruiser's chasing your AD carry. That's a really common scenario. Like maybe you've got, you know, whatever, something like a Mundo chasing your AD carry. You can just bind them with your Q and then just throw the E on them and just let the E sit on them. So that way, once they wake up out of that bind, then they're going to try to run, and it's going to be super slow before they get out of there. So that's something that's really helpful. Or you can just use the E, throw the E behind them. If they're going to run away, it's going to slow them down. And while they're slowed, it makes it much easier to hit your Q. Then if you hit them with the Q, you can auto attack, trigger that passive, trigger your E, auto attack, trigger that passive, and you just did a lot of damage. So I think that that's not really used enough just for the slow that's there. I think so many people just automatically activate it. And I was doing that a lot too. I was like, okay, you just want to put the damage on them. But sometimes the slow is even more valuable. Or if you're trying to siege a tower or something, just throw that E out there. It'll zone them off. They don't want to walk up, to protect the tower or to CS. It makes it really annoying for them to try to CS when you've got, this huge field, this huge slow here that's like in the way. So there are a lot of really nice uses for that slow. Even something like level 1, you're helping your jungler, try to kite out the camps. They take less damage. You just throw that E down, and then that'll slow down the jungler for a while, and then they can back up and reset their auto attack animation. The player can, and they're not going to take as many hits from the camp. So you might save them 2 or 3 auto attacks in the camp, which really adds up. So these are just a lot of very small, nuanced things about Lux that people don't really appreciate. So she's so much more than just like a burst sort of KS support a lot of times, right? She has so much utility, from the 2-second bind to the AoE shield to the slow / free ward, slash, poke damage, everything this offers. And then, of course, this is on a really low cooldown as well, so you can actually use this to wave clear a lot of times. If someone's just not helping manage the waves properly in the side wave, you can just go over there, wave clear it really quickly. That can set up all kinds of good situations on the map. So I think Lux support is extremely powerful right now. If you want to know more, be sure to watch the guide. I go into a lot more in that, but that's just kind of the quick version there. Quick, TSP, quick, 20-minute version there. But there's a couple different rune sets you can go. You can go Aftershock, Shield Bash, Bone Plating, Revitalize, then Ghost Poro, and Relentless Hunter. This is really good if you think you're going to get engaged and all end on. So if you think that, you're against something like a Nautilus or a Leona or a Thresh, that's a really good build to go. You're going to do a little bit less poke damage, but you still have a lot of utility. You still have the slow, the vision, the binds. You can still put out some decent poke as well. But then if you think you're not going to get engaged on, particularly if they don't have a healing support, then you can go for this more poke-centric build with Comet, Mana Flow, Absolute Focus, Scorch, and then Ghost Poro and Relentless Hunter. I really like these two in conjunction. It's a really powerful combination. You can go something like Gathering Storm if you want some poke early, but you want some scaling for later, because you don't think you're going to be able to put out enough harassment early to matter. So if you have like a Vayne or an Ezreal on your team, something like that, and you're just like, we're not going to poke them out because my AD carry is not going to do anything for the first 15 minutes, you can go Gathering Storm. That can be useful. Airy, I've had people ask about Airy. You can do Airy. It's more guaranteed poke early. It is going to give you more protection later on your shield, although your shield is already pretty big. You can go Airy if you want. I think Comet's probably better for poke, but if you want to do like maximum sort of Enchanter-esque type of scaling, you can go Airy if you want to. So maybe if they have something like a Zed or a Talon and you want to help your AD carry protect them from some of that all-in pressure, maybe Airy is actually going to be really useful in that situation. So if you think your AD carry is constantly they're going to be diving them and potentially killing them, then maybe Airy would be a good choice there. Although you want to make sure if you think they might dive and kill you, you might want to take Aftershock. So that's always a little bit of tension there. And then I think Ionian Boots, if you're pretty far ahead, Sorcerer Boots can also work. Frostfang, Athene's, Redemption, Ardent Censer. If your AD carry is really far ahead, you can go Ardent Censer before Redemption, but I would always go Athene's first. Chalice of Harmony is so nice in the laning phase, gives you a lot of extra sustain, which is great because you don't have a normal heal in your kit. And because you do so much poke damage with your E, you're always going to have a lot of stacks on your Athenes, and you can apply that to a lot of people really quickly with your W in team fight. So I think she's fantastic because she has so much poke and so much damage, where Athenes can really work. So I think Lux support is fantastic. It does take some getting used to. She is kind of tricky to play, but just keep in mind those little tricks there that people don't often think about with Lux, right? Like using the vision from the E, utilizing the slow to its maximum potential, and that type of stuff. It's mostly like using your E properly is something that I think a lot of people don't do. Okay, so a lot of time on those two champions, Yuumi and Lux. We'll go faster through the rest of them here. Sona, I talk about her every patch. You know, if someone doesn't have Sona tier 1, then they're trolling for solo queue. You're not going to see her in pro play unless she's paired with Taric. But she's so strong. She has the highest win rate. She has had the highest win rate for like 5 patches. She just scales insanely high. And she's so reliable. She's so easy to play. She's so easy to play. So if you're just looking for something that's just going to give you a huge amount of wins, I mean, she's my highest win rate support. Lux is pretty close. Lux was really far up there, but my Lux is like 61%. I think Sona's 62% with similar games played. Yeah, she's just too strong. I mean, she has really nice poke in the laning phase with her Q. You know, it does up to 320 damage when this is maxed out with a 1.0 ratio that also buffs up your allies a ton. It's on a 5-second cooldown, costs 70 mana. I mean, look at some of these numbers compared to what you see out of Yuumi or like any other support. It's just like absurd just how powerful this champion is if she doesn't get blown up immediately. Our Perseverance, this ends up giving like over 1,000 healing and shielding in team fights in a lot of situations, and that's before you even start considering what it does with Ardent Censer and Athene's Unholy Grail. With Athene's, it's going to be, you know, healing everybody for just a ton off of your W every time. You're going to be using all of your Athene stacks and your Q. The Q plus the W combo is what's really gross because this puts out so much damage. You can't miss it. These automatically hit. There's no skill shots on Sona except for her ult. It empowers your auto attack, so it charges up your Athenes constantly. Like every 5 seconds, your Athenes is going to be full. And then you get to redistribute all of that healing with your W also about every 5 seconds or so. So it's just massive. Executioners is okay against her, but it's not as crippling as it is against Soraka because a lot of your healing and shielding is a shield, which does not get reduced by Executioners. You have really good mobility with your W to zip around the map. Great utility for your team. And you have an AoE 1.5 second stun with your ult. That also, by the way, gives all of your normal abilities like, you know, 25% or 40% free CDR that stacks with other CDR multiplicatively, not additively, but still. It's ridiculous. Like, why does she have all this in her kit? I think they're going to nerf her at some point. I would start by taking this off. Like, there's no reason she needs free cooldown on the rest of her kit. This is already good enough. Like, 900 range, you know, AoE, 1.5 second stun. Good. Like, that's already good for a support. So, I don't know. She just does too much. Her AP scaling is just too high on everything. Although you should not go full AP on her. I've talked about this in entire videos before. You should be going Athene's Ardent Censer Redemption on her. That's the most powerful combination you can get. Do not get Seraph's Embrace. Do not get Lichbane. I mean, you can do those items, I guess, if you want, but they are far, far worse on support Sona because you're just not going to have the gold to make it work. So I'm not going to go into all that right now. I talk about that in my Sona Taric video. Be sure to check it out where I explain why everybody's playing that lane right now in Pro. But overall, she's just fantastic. She applies really good lane pressure. She scales extremely high later on in the game. She is very squishy. You can definitely camp her and kill her, so you want to be careful with that. But, you know, high-pressure supports are very good right now. You know, you want to be taking those tower plates. You want to be, you know, forcing the enemy AD carry to miss a lot of CS. There's a lot of other good AD carries that go well with her right now. Like Sivir's really good with her. Jinx is pretty good with her. So she's extremely strong right now. She definitely, you know, has the #1 win rate for a reason. So she starts to taper off a little bit as you get into Diamond, but certainly at Platinum and lower, and definitely at Gold and lower, she's going to be extremely powerful. Okay, so you want to go Airy, Mana Flow Ban, Absolute Focus, Gathering Storm. You can substitute Scorch for this if you think you're going to get a lot of pressure in lane. Then Bone Plating and Revitalize are very good. You know, you can substitute out a little bit more aggression here if you want to go something like Ghost Poro plus Relentless Hunter or Ghost Poro plus Taste of Blood. You can do that as well. Although I will say Bone Plating does help you keep you pretty safe. And then Revitalize is also quite strong with all of the healing and shielding that you send out. So I would probably go these two most of the time. Although you can substitute in, like I said, Scorch right here. And then Mobility Boots is what I take most of the time just to help you get around the map. Watchers, and then Athene's Ardent Sense and Redemption. Don't complete your Watchers until later in the game. Just keep it at Frostfang, and then go Athene's. Then after that, feel it out. Ardent Sensor probably most of the time, but you could also do Redemption. Okay, so Sona is still going to be quite strong. Nautilus. Now, I have Nautilus up here, and like I said earlier, I've had him as the #1 engaged support for a long time. He's been gaining. He is actually the #1 statistically right now, engaged support, and there are a lot of things that go into this. He has been buffed fairly recently. He got several buffs, so he got a higher AP ratio on his Q and higher base damage. Doesn't matter as much for most traditional builds. The big thing that helped him out a lot was this root. Being, I think it's, didn't they change it to 1.5 seconds at all ranks, or like 1 second at all ranks? Maybe they changed it to 0.75. Okay, yeah. So they changed it to 0.75 from 0.5. So you get more early, and then you got more baseline damage on your dredge line, and a higher AP ratio. Now, once again, you don't get AP a lot. You can get Ardent Sensor on him, which we'll talk about here in a second, but you don't want to do that as much. And then on 9.6, he got extra base armor, and the on-target cooldown is 6 seconds at all levels. So in light skirmishes, you can probably trigger it twice on some people. So pretty good buffs, but I think a lot of it is just a lot of people just were not playing him that often. But he brings so much to the table. He has really high base health, so like, 575 is pretty good. Pretty good health regen too at 8.5. Decent mana regen, and pretty good armor at 39. So he's going to be a lot stronger than something like Thresh for sure. I don't remember Pike's base stats. I think he's stronger than Pike base stat. He's not going to be as strong as something like Alistar or Braum, but he still brings a ton to the table. So the Q cannot go through walls. That's kind of the big drawback of it, but it can help you escape from situations. So if you do get ganked, you can Q onto a tower here and potentially get away from stuff. You can also zip around the map. You're running back to lane. You can attach to walls or towers or whatever. So it does give you a lot of extra mobility. It does give you an escape, which is something that a lot of hard engaged champs like Leona, like Thresh, they don't really have that. They can't escape themselves if they get into a bad situation. So it is very handy, although it comes at the cost of not being able to hook people over walls. But realistically, hooking people over walls usually gets you in trouble if you try to go over that wall anyways, except with Blitzcrank where you pull them to you. But on something like a Leona trying to hook over walls or a Thresh trying to go over walls can be really dangerous anyways a lot of the times. But one of the big things with this is it has no wind up and a huge hitbox. So it has a large range. So Thresh, has that half-second wind up when he throws his hook. Pike has to charge up for half a second. Leona's is relatively instant. Blitzcrank's is relatively instant. But it's a massive hitbox. So it's really easy to hook people with this. Pretty nice shield as well. 12-second cooldown. They lowered this a while ago. It used to be 18 seconds. Not amazing scaling on the shield, but it's okay. And then Riptide. Now, this is something that, once again, a lot of people don't talk about, but he actually has pretty good wave clear for a tank. Okay, and you might be saying, well, why do you wave clear as a support? Who cares? But there are so many instances where your team will not manage the wave properly. Like, people are trying to go position for Baron, right? They don't push mid lane. You've told them a million times, push mid and then Baron, but they just run over there anyway. So you're like, well, crap. And then you just have to try to push it as fast as you can, and then you go over here and help out with the Baron, right? Or your AD carry just randomly leaves you to go top lane after the bot tower falls when Dragon's still up, so you can't send 2 people top. And so you're forced to go down here and hold bot lane for a little bit, or your AD carry just runs up here before your top laner even backs, and your top laner's up there. And you just have to hold this by yourself for a little bit while their AD carry and support try to pressure you. So there's just weird little situations like that where your team just has really bad macro, where you just need that wave clear to help out a lot. Or you're just stuck trying to defend a tower. It's just you and like one other person. 3 people are dead. Having that extra wave clear does help out quite a bit. So that's something that's very, very undervalued by a lot of people. It's like, yes, you're not going to be doing it to CS a lot, but it might come up and it might be relevant. Or you just get a kill in bot lane, you're trying to push in and back, just using that E to help push in faster. It does add up a lot in games. So The fact that he does have like pretty respectable wave clear for his support is very nice. It does AoE damage, has a nice slow. It's great. And by the way, you should be maxing this first always. Occasionally will get people to say, oh, well, what about max shield or max Q? No, absolutely not. You always max your E, always, because it does more damage, it has a bigger slow, and the cooldown goes down. It scales triple, has triple scaling on it. And you really, really want that. That's most of your damage. That's your wave clear. It's a lot of your utility. It's everything is your E. So you want to max this E out first. The second thing that you max, that's more debatable. I think with the buffs to the Q, there is a conversation maybe for maxing Q second. You're going to be a bit squishier if you do that. So most of the time, I think you would want to max your shield, although it's not that much extra scaling. It's okay. A 40 extra shield here with 4% extra of your maximum health. It's relevant. It's like 120 extra shield, so that does add up. But, getting 180 extra damage on your Q and reducing the cooldown by 4 seconds is also pretty good. So I think that's debatable what you get second, but you should always Riptide first. And then his ult is supremely powerful. It's 120 seconds. It not only knocks up one person, it can knock up an entire squad of people for 2.5 second total stun, right? Because it knocks them up for 1 second and then stuns them for 1.5 seconds. So that's a lot. It can AoE. If you cast this on the back line, which you have good range on this, 825, you can hit every AD carry on the back line very comfortably, very easily. It goes through everybody. Nobody can body block this. And it's not only going to hit that AD carry on the back line, it's going to hit everyone else that's in the way for the damage and the stun. So he's just huge. He has a ton of CC. It's on a low cooldown. He has lots of utility. He's just really, really powerful right now. And the fact that champions like Tahm Kench and like Morgana have been nerfed, those are the champions that were the best against him. And they are not getting played as much now. So he's very, very good against other hook champions like Thresh because he's going to have more defense. He's going to have more CC, and he's going to have better scaling. Now, you can get something like Ardent Sensor on him. He does have an AP ratio, on his ult, on his Q, and on his E. That's pretty respectable. It is going to make you a lot squishier, but you can do that later on if you want to, or if their team just doesn't have a lot of damage. That is an option that's on the table for you. So think about it. You might say, well, how would you trigger Ardent Sensor? Font of Life. Every time you slow somebody with your E, it puts that mark over their head. If anyone auto-attacks that person, then they're going to get the Ardent Sensor buff. So that can be a really powerful thing situationally to use. You can still do Footwear and Cosmic, although I would actually say I think that Relentless is so good you have to have that, and I would probably go Ghost Poro. Another option you could do is Cheap Shot. Maybe go Cheap Shot. Because you do constantly slow and CC everybody, so you are going to be doing a lot of extra damage off a Cheap Shot. So especially if you think you have some good kill potential early, Cheap Shot could be pretty good. Then instead of Unflinching, I would go for, I don't remember what the name of that rune is, the Health one. It did get buffed fairly recently. Blanking out on the name. The thing that gives you HP that stacks Overgrowth. So it's not that great early on, but it does give you some extra scaling later on. So it's decent. And I'd probably just go Ninja Tabby, Equinox, and then Zeke's Knight's Vow Locket, although you can do Ardent somewhere in there if you want to. You can do Redemption somewhere in there if you want to. I think Zeke's is a good place to start because you have a low cooldown ult, and you're going to be able to stick to people a lot. So that means you're going to get a lot of extra damage off of the Zeke's passive. So I think that can be really helpful. So yeah, Nautilus, fantastic engage support right now. Definitely trending up in terms of overall win rates. Okay, Lulu's still going to be very strong. A lot of the on-hit champions are kind of going by the wayside here, so she'll go down maybe a little bit. But she still has really good lane pressure. She's a great combo with Sivir, who I think is going to be strong right now because she has really good wave clear as well. You'll notice that with a lot of these champions up here, at least the Nautilus, the Lulu, and the Lux, they all have great wave clear. So you can get 3 points of Q in lane early. That will give you good wave clear. It'll give you good poke. You can go Athene's early if you want to, although Ardent Sensor is also very strong on her. And she just scales. She's probably the best scaling enchanter right now. If you can get through the laning phase and you can trust that your AD carry is not going to be a complete turkey. So do your Poro Fessor or your OP.GG or whatever. Scout your team. Make sure your AD carry is an AD carry main that's playing something they know how to play. And if they're doing that, Lulu's going to be pretty good. So she's particularly good with things that have a lot of attack speed. So like Kaisa, Jinx, Sivir, like those are all going to be great. Was very good with Vayne. The on-hit version of Vayne might be going away. We'll see. But she's pretty good with most AD carries. Be a little careful if you have something like a Jen on your team or a Misfortune or like a Draven, these champions that want to do a lot of burst upfront damage. You know, her W's not going to be as strong in those situations. But then again, you can always just polymorph someone on the enemy's team. So you don't have to speed up and give your AD carry the attack speed. So she's got a lot of versatility, good poke in lane, shield kind of anemic. I think a lot of builds, you just aren't even really getting your shield very much anymore. So I just wouldn't even consider her much of a shielder. You know, I think just getting 3 points of Glitter Lance and then maxing out your Whimsy and then maxing shield last is where you want to be. Of course, you'll put 1 point in it. But, you know, you do still have Wild Growth. You do still have Airy who will pop on your shield to help out a little bit. But you're mostly like a debuffer and a buffer. It's what you want to think of yourself as. So your Whimsy, your Glitter Lance, your ult. That's really where you want to be. Because, like, your shield itself falls off after 2.5 seconds. So it's a lot weaker than it used to be. Now, in some matchups, you certainly can go more points in your E if you want to. But I think a lot of times, if you can get priority, you just want to push with Glitter Lance and just try to scale up for later with your Whimsy. So, good champion, great scaling. You know, the passive combined with Whimsy gives you over, 2,000 gold worth of stats on your AD carry if you choose to buff them up. And in some cases, closer to 3,000 gold. Not even including the Ardent Sensor buff. So if you have a Lulu that combines with some like a hyper scaler like a Twitch or a Jinx or whatever, in the late game, you're going to completely obliterate everybody. So she's still going to be a very strong champion, even though I suspect she might go down a little bit on this patch just because a lot of those on-hit champs are going to get nerfed a bit more, and some of the more bursty type of champs are going to come back onto the scene. Some more crit is going to come back into the scene. But I do think you want to go Airy, Mana Flow, Absolute Focus, Scorch, and then Footwear and Biscuits is what I had been recommending. I think I would probably switch that over to Poro and Relentless. This one's a little more dicey. She doesn't have great AP ratios, but Relentless Hunter is just so OP. I think you have to get that. You could do Taste of Blood if you want to. If you're going to be trading a lot, Taste of Blood's perfectly reasonable instead of Ghost Poro if you want more early game pressure. Although starting off with 4 to 6 AP is definitely useful. And then I would just go Nomad's Battalion. You can do Frostfang if you think you're comfortably going to be able to harass a lot and win the lane. If you're not against like a Sona or a Nami, if you're against a melee support, then you can go Frostfang. Nomad is more reliable. But I guess I'll just say Frostfang in the rosy scenarios. Then Ardent Sensor and Redemption can be very strong as well. Okay, and if you need to, you can go Zeke's. You know, you could even go something like Guardian if you had to. You could even go Aftershock if you were really scared against Enchanters because you can just polymorph, and that would trigger Aftershock. But Airy is just so strong because that allows you, whenever you put your W on somebody, that will put Airy on them, and that will trigger Ardent Sensor. And so you can comfortably put Ardent on 2 people by using W to put it on them and then using your shield with your E to put it on somebody else. So that just allows you to distribute your Ardent Sensor to a bunch of different people if you have that. And Airy's just super strong anyways. It's great poke, scales really well over time. So I would probably stick with Airy, but there might, maybe there's some circumstances where you could try some different stuff. It's possible. Okay, and then finally for the tier 1, we've got Nami. So Nami's still going to be pretty good. She has nice, safe ranges, pretty good harassment with her W early on. Great with Lucian, who's kind of fallen out of the meta a little bit, but your E off of those double shots with him is pretty strong. You have several knockups, so pretty good with something like a Yasuo. Your bubble can knock people up. Your wave can knock people up. Wave is really long range, so it can knock people out of certain things, like Jhin channeling his ult, Xerath channeling his ult, stopping teleports. There's several useful things you can do with Tidal Wave. So she's okay. She just doesn't scale as well as Lulu and some of these other champions, or Sona, but she is safer. She does provide more CC. more reliable trading early on in the laning phase. She has pretty nice base movement speed too at 335, so she's still going to be pretty good in the right situation. Pretty good with wombo combo stuff too. You know, things like Amumu or Kennen or whatever. Like being able to chain other people's CC with your bubble and your wave can be very powerful. So I still think that she's pretty good. And yeah, just Airy, Mana Flow Band, Absolute Focus, Gathering Storm, then Ghost Pour, Relentless Hunter. I'd probably go Scorch, especially after the buffs to Scorch recently. Depends on the matchup, but you can put down a lot of pressure early. And then I might go Ionian Boots here. And then Frostfang, Athene's Redemption, Ardent Censer. If you go for Relentless, I don't think you need Mobility Boots anymore, so that does free you up to get other kinds of boots. You know, maybe there's an argument for getting Transcendence instead later on, so that you get the extra 20 AP off of your excess CDR, which, you know, there's a lot of CDR on this build. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 CDR, and then Transcendence will give you another a 6th CDR. So that'll give you up to 40 extra AP later on, which can be very strong. So maybe you do lose a little bit of extra AP early, but later on you'll get more. I don't know. I'd have to run the math on that. I think Absolute Focus is probably a little bit better for the early game, but like if you think it's going to go really late, maybe you should be going something like Transcendence instead and Ionian Boots, because that will scale best later on in the game. Okay, and then the tier 2, and we're going to run through the rest of these really quickly here. I think Zyra's risen up a little bit more on this patch just because there's going to be more high damage champions that have early game pressure, I think, rather than the scaling champs. I suspect we'll probably see less Ezreal, less Vayne, hopefully, please, less Ezreal, less Vayne, and we'll probably be seeing more Sivers, more Jinxes, Draven, maybe some Caitlyn. Jhin is starting to kind of make a comeback. I don't think he's making a comeback win rate wise, but people are trying to play that you know, all Infinity Edge Jhin build. Yeah, so he's about the same, but people are trying out that build for whatever reason. I mean, I guess it's cool. So I think there's going to be more lane dominant 80 carries. You know, Misfortune's still pretty strong with that that Blather and King build. So I think we'll see more lane dominant 80 carries. That's going to help out with Zyra and her plants early on. Getting tower plates is really important now, especially after the nerf to Scuttle. You can have more time to pressure early. You might see more tanks in the jungle. So if you have more tanks, Zyra is going to be a lot better. She can CC and do pretty good damage to tanks if the enemy team has them. Then also your team might be lacking some damage if you have tanks in multiple lanes or just low damage champs in multiple lanes. So you might need to step it up and have a higher damage support to make up for that. So Zyra can step in and help out with that too. So I think there are more and more situations where you'd want to play Zyra now. She's always been good at silver and lower, and even at gold and lower probably. At platinum, it starts to get a little tougher with her. But I think with the meta shifting, because she's terrible if you have like an Ezreal or a Vayne on your team, it sucks. It's really bad because they just can't help you out at all with your early harassment. But, you know, maybe with some of these shifts, it's possible that we could see Zyra rise up a little bit more in power. Okay, Reconnaissance. So with Zyra, you just want to go a standard Frostfang build. So I'd probably just go Dark Harvest, Taste of Blood. I actually haven't updated this one. So Dark Harvest, Taste of Blood, Ghost Poro, and probably Relentless Hunter. Probably Absolute Focus and Scorch. Yeah, I'm recording.
Okay, for how much longer?
I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes.
Okay, could you pick up Rory? There's a really long line here. I don't know if I'm gonna make it.
Oh my god, she has to be picked up by 6?
Yes, by 6. I'll call you when I get out of here.
Okay.
Okay.
Alright, bye.
Bye.
Sorry, she called me like 3 times in a row, so I thought it might be something really important. Okay. But yeah, so this build can give you a lot of pressure early on. I think that can be pretty good. Especially with the buffs too, Ghost Poro and Relentless Hunter. I haven't tried her out with some of these builds. You can still go Comet as well if you want to. Maybe Comet's better than Dark Harvest. I don't know. I'll have to run the numbers on that. But anyways, so pretty good options here, and then just Leandries, and I think Morello is probably where you want to go after that. Okay. Soraka, we already talked about her a lot. If the movement speed has changed, then I think that she can be a lot better. If it has not changed, then she'll still be okay. I still just think that Sona's just better than her. I was hoping that the movement speed would change, but, if you just want somebody who is going to be really risky, who's going to be very squishy, but scales really hard, I'd probably rather just have Sona. Although Soraka is really good if you have a lot of tanks. Sona's pretty good in that scenario as well. I'm just not sure of a lot of places where I would want Soraka over Sona. I mean, Sona just has much, much easier harassment in the laning phase with just Qs and autos. And I think that she scales better later on in the game when she can just spam W on everybody because it heals and shields so many different people. She's not as vulnerable to executioners, and she doesn't hurt herself. So she can heal herself whenever she does her W. So, I don't know. And she has an AoE stun for team fights. Soraka does have global pressure with her ult, so if you're really good at figuring out when you should ult properly, that can definitely be powerful, but I think most of the time I'd rather have Sona still, unless that movement speed has changed a lot. We'll have to see, because there's not a technical term for decay, so we don't know. Thresh, he's still popular. He's still okay. The problem is, his runes aren't that great. He takes Aftershock. It's all right. If he does get some kills early, he can snowball. He does have a lot of potential. He has a great kit, hooking people. Still going to be strong, lanterning to save people, using it offensively or defensively, flaying people back like Jarvan, who are trying to flag and drag on your AD carry. Can be very powerful, or like a Hecarim who's trying to run in. There are a lot of really good uses for Thresh. It's just his itemization, his runes are just really, really lackluster. And I think Nautilus just dumpsters him right now. Nautilus is just tankier than he is, has more CC than he does, is much easier to play than he is. So that's a really rough matchup. I feel like Zyra is a rough matchup. Thresh can be pretty good into things like Lux, Sona, Lulu, if you get on them early. But if the game goes late, it's going to be really hard. So he's all right, but, I don't think he's going to be that amazing. I actually skipped Rakan. I forgot. I took that phone call. Messed me up. Skipped the Rakan. So Rakan is going to be a bit stronger. I talked about him a lot last patch. He has higher base stats now. He has way more HP. I forgot what else they gave him extra armor early on, which is great too. So if you get multiple points in Q early, you can actually do some pretty light trades, and it's all right. He is someone who offers really strong engage, but also a lot of protection from assassins because he has that double shield he can put up, and his R is really good. So he's great into things like Zed or Talon. But he is going to be squishy. So if the enemy has a huge AoE teamfight comp, that can be a problem. So you don't want to E in to try to save somebody when a cannon ult's going off on your AD carry, for example. You're just going to get yourself killed. Whereas something like Nautilus might be able to go in there and peel and survive. He's okay. I think Nautilus is much more guaranteed engage with Nautilus's R. But Rakan can CC multiple people. He has more poke in the laning phase. And he has potentially better scaling for the AD carry overall because Rakan can still get things like Zeke's plus Ardent Sensor. Nautilus can do that too, to an extent, which is why Nautilus is higher. But I still think there's a lot of potential for Rakan, especially if Xayah starts to see a comeback, which she might on this patch. We'll see. If people, because Essence Reaver did just get buffed, and if people start figuring out you can go Essence Reaver, Rapid Fire Cannon, or Phantom Dancer into Infinity Edge, Xayah can be pretty good. I've been calling for that build for several patches, but I think people might be figuring it out now. I think I saw some pros doing it in MSI. Okay. Pyke, still going to be pretty good. I know some people have him a lot higher than this. He just has to snowball, and he's really unreliable in my mind. He has to land those. He has to get ahead early. He can get ahead with his ult early, but he's okay. I mean, he can go invisible. He can get around. He can have some really good ganks. It's possible he could be as high as tier 1. It's just he has really nice offense, but he has very, very little defense. So if your team is behind, his peel is really lackluster. You know, if you try to hook somebody, sometimes you can accidentally pull the enemy even closer to your AD carry. You know, trying to use your E for peel can be really rough. It's just very difficult to use him if you're behind. And especially if you're against a bunch of tanks, you're not going to be able to execute them as easily because your execution is flat damage. It's not percentage based. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it's flat damage. So that's going to be rough potentially, but he's okay. He can still be strong. If you snowball hard with him, he's all right. I just feel like he's a bit riskier than some of the other picks out there. But, you know, you could put him as high as upper tier 2, maybe sneak him into tier 1 if you prefer him over something like Lulu or Nami maybe, but he's still going to have some problems. And then finally, the tier 3, and this is going to be it really quickly. Leona can still be okay, has tough matchups into Nautilus, into Thresh. Very risky if you fall, like, has really nice engage, but if you fall behind, there's not a lot you can do. It's kind of like Pike syndrome there, where it's like if you're ahead and you're dominating, she's great. If you're behind, it's rough because you have very limited peel and very limited utility. But you know, she can still work in the right situation. Janna can be good. She is good at peeling a lot of hard engaged champions and tanks. So like you know, your Jarvans, your Hekrams, all that stuff. She can be pretty good in appealing that. But Sadie, why do you stop? God. It's just like non-stop. She's just running around trying to mess with as many things as possible to try to get me to pay attention and feed her. Even though I just fed her like 10 minutes ago. Or I guess before this video started. No, just stop. But she can be okay if you're against like a tank support. So if you're against a Leona or you're against a Nautilus, she can be all right. But she gets beaten up by other enchanters because her shield sucks early on. She does not have a heal. She just has a really hard time into things like Sona and Nami, Lulu. All those champions just bust her up in lane. Zyra. So she can work, but I think she's more of a counter pick now than she has been in the past. Morgana's okay. You know, she did get nerfed a lot recently. If you want to play her into something like a Nautilus or a Thresh, she can work, but I think she's been nerfed quite a bit. Galio's okay as well. You know, you do see him a lot in pro play, but he requires a lot more coordination. He doesn't scale very well, and he can get busted up by enchanters if you fall behind early on. So he's all right, but I think there are probably better choices out there. And then Braum, very good if you're challenger, not so good if you're gold or platinum or lower. You know, he is very good with Lucian. Lucian's pretty much fallen out of the meta, so you can block a lot of projectiles. He's still kind of the king of team fighting, but he has very low scaling. And just not a lot of agency, not a lot of playmaking ability. If you want to play a tank, I would play something that can hard engage like a Nautilus or a Thresh or something like that. Okay, and that's going to be it. Thank y'all very much for tuning in. As always, I really appreciate it. Be sure to check out the AD carry tier list. I should have that out either later today or tomorrow, and then I'll have a jungle tier list, and I'll see if I can get a mid-tier list out for you as well. So thank you very much. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.